When I was 16 years old, once my mother almost broke down the door on my childhood bedroom because he was, for some reason, very, very emotionally charged and upset. And all I remember was I could never predict my mother, which is a defining trait of a narcissist. And all I ever remember her doing is abusing me in a way that is so subtle that my father could never notice. But even when he would never believe it. And for some reason, I was always just a competition to my mother, never an inspiration. Even when I was grateful from the bottom of my heart, she could never receive it. She was never open emotionally. And so when I turned older, I started to rebel for the first time in my life, even sexually. And I started becoming just like her, honestly, because up until the age of 18, I just figured that because I have to stay home with her, I really do not have an option but to keep away myself as much as possible in all realms, including emotionally. But ever since I turned 18, it's been around and around, going back to her and then leaving her again and again, and it all felt like it was out of my control. And I know that it was her subconscious reaction to her not being able to handle the fact that she didn't even want to have me in the first place. I know that all of this is not my fault. I know that I didn't do anything to deserve this, even though the only thing that I have ever been made to feel is that I did. And one of my few coping mechanisms included me hating on myself unconditionally as a way to raise the white flag. Hey, I do not need you to hate me. I already hate myself. And it was just fuel on the fire when my sister called me a strong woman on a Woman's Day once when I was around 22 years old, in order to celebrate us three: me, my mom, and my sister. But it never felt like a celebration associating myself, with them. My sister has always been closer to my mother than I have. But my sister also started rebelling earlier. She was older than me when she started, with 5 years. She was ahead of me. She was almost the direct mirror of my mother, except softer, both in features and in behavior. And yet my father kept hating on her, unlike he ever did towards my mother. If anything, all he did to my mother was save her and rescue her and save her again and rescue her again from the consequences of her actions, with no boundaries, just, Christian standards here and there, which my mother never seemed to follow, not in my eyes. For some reason, from the moment I remember her acting out, I just resented my mother for the way she did everything. And I never understood my sister, who was just so tolerant and allowing and accepting. And then last year it turned out that in January my sister wanted to leave this earth. And we were sitting at the dinner table, four of us, me, my sister, my mother, and my father. And my sister presented this fact and nobody reacted. And she was just literally detailing her contemplation of her leaving this earth in her own apartment without anyone ever realizing it. And most of us just sat in silence, and it was because my sister, is the middle child, so she has mostly been glazed over by my parents, but me, on the other hand, I got way too much attention. And from my mother, I never ever got physical and emotional and mental support, because all I ever got was physical, too much physically. I never got emotional support, empathy, any of that. I never got mental clarity from her. I never got tools and skills to understand myself in the world from her. All she ever did was belittle me verbally and use me as an emotional punching bag. I never felt like I belonged to her or my family because of her. And once before we stood together, she never even, like, there was one time when we stood before a police officer, and before that she never even introduced myself. She never did the right thing in introducing herself to me. And once it came to action and once it came down to it, she just stayed passive when she should have been the most active. Apparently, she had already acted out when I was 16 years old, screaming at my door. Her, that is. And when I was screaming, thinking that authenticity would serve me somehow, because my mother showed up in the middle of the night, and the police stopped me because I was alone, and they didn't understand why I was on the floor. And I started screaming when my mother showed up, and you know what happened then? My mother talked the police officer into calling the ambulance. And then I held the other cheek and went with them. But I never talked about my mother in that moment, about how she screamed once. And I should have, I think. I do not understand this protection around mothers. I do not understand why mothers get so many perks and benefits when their children should get just as much. And not just in one way, but in as many aspects of life as possible. Not just through, for example, food, but, through boundaries. What if you give your child everything but you lack in one area, and then that is what will break your own child? It is not what she said or what she did not say. It is not what she did or what she did not do. It is what happened to me that impacted my body, which will never return to its original state, which she will never understand, which the police will never understand, which the man who injected me will never understand, which any man who has ever loved me will never understand, which no loved one of mine will ever understand. Except me. And this is what makes this journey so lonely, is that the very person who did me wrong in the first place never gave me an outlet. But when I did have an outlet in real life, because I couldn't hold it anymore, the person who caused the whole thing made it all worse. And if I was to approach her today and say to her face that she did this, she wouldn't admit. She would just run to my father as if she had been running to Daddy. Please, save me. Like a child. But worse. Because she is a mother. She is a victim. And I am not. And I do not understand why I have to appear as the victim to save my mother just to survive. I do not understand why children have to go through these things before they are able to express them. I do not understand why someone's learning experience has to come at the expense of traumatizing others. I do not understand why we cannot understand each other as human beings before we try to love them so much, especially after the age of 18 and 20 and 21 and 22 and 23 and 24 and 25. I do not understand why we cannot enforce our boundaries on time and in the proper manner. I cannot understand why we have to keep our mouths open while we chew on food. I do not understand why we swear. I do not understand why we curse. I do not understand why we promise things we cannot deliver on. I do not understand why we have to do this if we do not even open the Bible, for example. I do not understand why we say we follow things when we do not even know how to follow them. I do not understand. I just don't. I wish I could, but because I will never be understood myself anymore, I wouldn't care. I couldn't care less if I did understand. People's problems, people's pain. This country is a pit hole. It's a nitwit. It's a valley of death. And yet we still keep murdering each other alive with words and with behavior and even with thoughts. And nobody believes me when I say this. Because they get scared usually. They do not even dare go there with me. And I suppose no one should. But I just do not understand why some people cause hell in other people's lives, and then when they see them suffer, they cause more hell. I just do not understand why it's so necessary to add insult to injury. And I do not understand why I have free speech when I do not have physical freedom. And yet when I open my mouth, I get taken to places that give me physical freedom. But because I open my mouth, and immediately realized that I did not have the right to speak freely. In reality. Because nothing seems to be for free in this life except trust. But trust is the bond that sustains relationships. And without it, nothing is working, it seems. Not to me, at least.